Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Painted in Color podcast. I'm co-host Lauren Brown, and this is co-host Mia Araujo. And today we're going to talk about embracing your cringe and finishing your stories. This is something that we both have experience with, but Mia in particular is having a book called A Fiat in the Land of Wonders coming out very soon in April, if I'm not mistaken. I'm
Yeah.
so excited. And so we just wanted to talk about the value of going into your creations fully authentic, chest first, and letting yourself really be present in the moment with who you are, what you want to communicate, what you want to give to your audience. I'm a mentor of a few people right now, and a lot of people in my mentorships really have trouble with letting themselves be authentic and open and understanding who they are as an artist and what they want to pursue. And the true beauty comes when, not when you're trying to conform, but when you actually let yourself just go full force, self-indulgent, and create the things that you alone would create with all your culminated experiences, with all your excitements and cringe, basically.
Yeah.
And so that's what we're going to talk about. Let's get into the episode.
The thing you just said about trying to embrace the cringe, I feel like all my life, especially early on, I was trying to run away from what I thought was cringe about myself, like basically trying to hide the sort of flaily inner self with some kind of mask, whatever that is, of like when I was in high school, it's like all the things I thought were cool, right? But it was all a mask to try not to show who I really was, or like, the stories I guess I thought were too embarrassing to tell. But even just with this story, like this book that I just finished, it's like even from the beginning, I was doing everything I could to not actually write the story myself. So like
Yeah.
the story, honestly, the idea really started with me wanting to re-illustrate Lewis Carroll's original text. So I wasn't going to write anything at all. And then it kind of evolved to, no way, it's a sister story. So, and I'm recasting the characters and the setting and everything. So it's just going to be copy paste my characters into the plot that already exists. And that just,
No.
it just wasn't interesting to read, but I was so scared of writing it myself. Like I literally just did not have any faith in myself that I could write an engaging story, like that would keep people turning the pages, or characters that would be like, how could I write characters that were more interesting than Lewis Carroll's? And the thing is, like, that wasn't the point. They don't have to be
Yeah.
more interesting than his. They just have to be true to me, right? It's like it doesn't even have to be good, right? And it's like
Yeah.
we stop ourselves so much from like it has to be these things before it's allowed to exist. And really all it has to be is something you connect with, right? And I think that so anyway, like I guess going back to your point about I had to embrace the cringe before I could get to the good stuff, right? Like you have to be willing to be terrible. There's a quote somewhere out there. It's like you have to, be willing to be stupid or be willing to fail miserably before you can actually do good work. And
Yeah.
really to plumb those depths, right? So it's like, yeah, anyway, I lived through that for many years. And it's not like a straight line either, right? It's like you think
No,
you're going deep and then you're
it
like
is.
covering up again and then you have to keep going deeper. Yeah, exactly.
I
It's
think that's the misconception that a lot of people have too, is that when they look at successful artists, all they see is that pinnacle of success, whatever that looks like for them. But they have no idea what that winding path actually looks like. It's like, ooh, because like when you're working on such a big project like a story, like a book, a novel, a graphic novel, anything, there's always going to be ups and downs. There's always going to be days where you feel like this is nothing. I can't believe I'm working on something that's so nothing. Why am I spending all my time doing this? And there's going to be other days where the ideas will not stop pouring out of your head and you're like, "Oh my God, I can't even draw fast enough to get these all down." And there's so much there's so much strife within that. And the success comes from the fact that you haven't given up on it,
yeah.
that you've allowed it to live in some way or the other. Because I always go back to what Tim Folder had told us. He's like, nobody cares
Yeah.
about your story unless you put it out in the world. Like, no one's going to care about what idea you had. Nobody's going to care about the draft that's hidden in your computer that only you've read, because they can't care because they can never experience it and see it.
Yeah.
And you sharing that, how it felt, the fact that like you had basically copied the text of Lewis Carroll's story, it's weirdly heartening to hear, because right now I'm writing a story, and I was just lamenting to a friend earlier today that I was like, man, I have all these diverging paths of what's possible, and I'm so afraid to collapse them into just like one path because I keep thinking that like, oh, maybe this other path has so much potential of
Mhm.
going somewhere else. And and I was describing like the different options that I had for the story to them, and they were like, well, they were like one of the paths seems really fleshed out, and they're like, why don't you just go with that one? And I was like, oh, because like there's just another path over there, but I've had this other path the longest. She was like, why don't you just go with the path that you've already like worked on and fleshed out? And I was like, oh yeah, I guess I could do that. But my unconfidence comes from being so scared to choose the wrong path.
Yes.
And the thing that people have to realize when they're working on their own stories is that there's not really a wrong path. This is your story that
Mhm.
you get to tell that can only come from you. So whatever path you choose is the path that your story is going to eventually be. And I think I need to hear that more than anything else. And I'm sure that other people probably need to hear it because I've been tying myself in knots for 12 years trying to get the story out. And I'm like, I just need to write it and try something
Yeah.
and be bad at it at first and then fix it and it will get better and then edit it and it'll get better.
Mhm.
But nobody's ever good when you start out on anything. And I think like artists, especially because we spent our life honing a specific craft, um, we are a lot of us are afraid of being bad at something for a prolonged period of time. 'Cause it's like, well, maybe this is not meant for me, but this is never good. It's like, well, I think the better question to ask is, do I love this process enough to continue with it, to suffer through it? Like, is it something that feels like me? Do I feel like it needs to happen?
Mhm.
Like for my own sake, really, because like ultimately you make stories for you.
Yeah.
The best stories are stories that are made for the person themselves and not like thinking about, oh my God, my audience is going to hate this, they're going to love this, blah, blah, blah. It has to start from you.
Hmm.
So
Yes.
yeah, as a mentor, I teach the philosophy of embracing your cringe. And I think leaning into that cringe and leaning into like what we want at our core, even if it seems embarrassing or juvenile or immature, is like the most beautiful way to write a story or create a piece of art in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah. No, that's great. And I see it as a starting point too, because I think when I think back when I was in my teens, especially, but even up till, my early 20s, I was so judgmental of myself. And just same with like we talked about on the show before, being judgmental of your style or hating your style, because
Yeah.
what you're hating is your vulnerabilities, or your what you feel like is not your strengths, right? And you love other people's work because you can't see their weaknesses. All you see is their strengths, right? And so I feel like when I used to think about my ideas when I was, in that I want to avoid cringe, it was like I thought that was like if I just chose those ideas, that's how they would end up. Like
Yeah.
would be no improvement. And that's the thing, that's just the starting point. You just have to be able to embrace them and say these are ideas worth exploring, but it's not the end point. You can perfect that idea and make it the best thing it can be. And it's probably going to be way better than you ever thought of. Because that's another thing I can say from experience now. Looking back to the very first iterations of this, there's some similarities, but there's also some things I never could have imagined, like of how to
Yeah.
put it up. And that's kind of awesome because, and even my skill set, right? Like I was not ready to write and illustrate a book, but it didn't matter. And back then I thought, I cannot put myself to do this because I don't have the skills yet. I have to be able to perform this. And that's just not true. Like
Not true at all.
some people do kind of perform their jobs because they do have those skills, but I'm saying from experience, you don't have to do every project like that. Like you can start ones that you have no idea how to finish and you can learn how to do it as you're doing it because I did I did that.
Yeah.
So but yeah, it's crazy because I'm definitely somebody who lets a lot of fear get in the way of my art making and have done for most of my life. Well, I shouldn't say most of my life because I think I was actually pretty free and expressive as a kid. I think that fear set in really in high school and college, suddenly not being the one artist in class and being around 1,000 artists who were all better
Oh,
than me.
oh, I remember that experience folded me. I remember it didn't happen in my undergrad, it happened at SCAD.
Mm.
Um, when I went to a school where like everybody had like a good measure of training already because I was in grad school. And I was like, oh, I'm no longer the big fish in the little pond anymore. I am nothing, I am insignificant, and I doubted myself so much. And I think that's when I had the biggest confusion because everybody was doing such a different style from me. And I was like, well, I guess this is like nothing because I guess this is not what's relevant for the industry. Little did I know that I wasn't even training for the industry that I wanted to even be in until I discovered that. And I was like, oh, wait, this is not even for me. Like, that's why I feel so different from everybody because I want to work in animation. But as an illustrator, what does that look like? Oh, it's Viz Dev. Got it. Um, but so I was never provided the tools to distinguish between the two things that I needed. And instead, I was just kind of like, trying different things in confusion and trying to conform to what everybody else was doing. And of course that didn't work. Of course, I look back at that old portfolio and I was like, oh, baby, oh, you were so confused. You didn't know what you were doing. That's okay. You found it. And I had to reassure myself because I was like, is this right? I don't know. Like maybe like thin line art with like these like people with dot eyes, like it is New York Times style. I didn't know. And then, it's so funny too, because when I was outside of school assignments, I would do my personal work that looked very much like what I'm doing now
Wow.
and being way happier with it and just not even conceiving of the idea that I could just put that style in my schoolwork and
Yeah.
let that shine for what it is. I didn't think it was relevant enough. I didn't think it was good enough. And I didn't think anybody else would accept it. And if I had tried that, I'm sure they would have, but I held myself back because of fear
Yeah.
of not being accepted for who I was and being too nerdy or being too anime or being too whimsical.
Mhm.
And lo and behold, that's what made my career what it is today.
Yeah.
Yeah. So embrace your cringe, folks.
Yeah. If it makes you cringe, that's where the real stuff is.
Exactly.
And same with like if it scares the heck out of you, because I think that's the same thing too. This project was never again, I always wish I was back to like my younger self. I was just excited to make things, and there's still things I'm excited to make, but it's laced with fear. It's laced with like, oh gosh, I am gonna crash and burn and just completely fail at this. And I actually used to hate that and think that that was a sign of my not being a pro, not being good enough, all this stuff. But now I realize the more pros I've talked to are at every level, right? Or the more artists from different backgrounds, different levels of achievement, different things they've made, I realize that it
Yeah,
doesn't matter how many things you've made or how long you've been in it or how masterful you are. It still scares the crap out of you
absolutely.
if it's worth doing, because any big thing that's going to push you in terms of your skills or push you in terms of you learning, a lot more than you about yourself, especially, is going to scare you. Either if it doesn't, you're not human.
Yeah. And it's like you did the whole project kind of afraid, didn't you?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And you didn't let it stop you, which is honestly so inspiring
Oh. I,
that you felt fear and walked through it and did it anyway.
yeah, I don't. It doesn't feel very brave because I didn't feel brave doing it. But I guess in retrospect, I made it to the end, so I guess that is kind of brave. But again, it's just like that's something too. Watching fantasy movies or just any movies about war and stuff. When I was a kid, I used to think, oh wow, they're so brave because they're not scared. But actually, the characters I relate to more are the ones you see are afraid and they still fight through anyway.
Exactly.
It's not the absence of fear that's inspiring, right? It's like it's the fact that you do it anyway.
Yeah.
And again, sorry, go ahead.
Despite the fear, go on.
Yeah, yeah. Also, when you don't have a reference point for the thing you're doing, like if it's the first time you're doing something, it's very easy to be afraid and to doubt yourself because you have nothing to point to and say, I've done this before.
Yeah.
And it is so empowering. Like it's crazy how like to just get to the end, you're like, oh, now suddenly I feel like I can do it. But I don't know. I feel that way sometimes, and then other times I just it's still very soon how you know what I mean, like everything I went through that I'm like I'm still scared because I know it's not gonna be any easier to do it again. It's just that now I know what to expect, and that's kind of worse in some ways too. So
You're like, okay, I guess I gotta embark on this journey all over again.
yeah, yeah.
But it's funny because you were like, I guess it's kind of brave that I did this. I'm like, no, it's not kind of brave. It is the definition of bravery, Mia.
Yeah.
It's literally what you've done was bravery because you did it with fear and you finished it despite the fear. And it's like that's what it is. It's like it is normal to feel fear when it is something so vulnerable and personal. And when you feel that, you should take it as a sign of validation that I am doing the right thing because it scares me. It
Yeah.
scares the crap out of me. And that feeling does stop a lot of people. Like I wonder at all the things that we don't see
Hmm.
come to life because there's just so much fear associated with it. And it's me included too. Like, it's fear that was stopping me from making this project for a long, long time. And I still feel afraid of it. And I'm like, well, I know that it's like something that it means a lot to me. And I can make it happen. And I'm tired of talking about it and I just want to do it. And I want to take your example and continue to forge forward, like, and just let it be all the things that I think are weird and wonderful. And even if they don't make any sense, even if they seem strange to other people, I'm like, well, this is who I am. So have this piece of my brain and experience this thing because like that is really where the gold is, where you feel that sweet spot of like, surely I can't just do this. This is so like self-indulgent. And that's exactly where you want to be. And like, for a story, like you want to feel that sense of like, yeah, I'm getting away with this.
Yeah.
It's like you want to like take it, I'm getting away with this and nobody can stop me.
Yeah. It's the feeling you tend to want to run away from, but it's actually the one you should run towards because I think we've all seen all these blockbuster movies or whatever that feel like they have no heart, like they have nothing to say. And that's to me, that's the secret to any storytelling, right? Is to have something to say. And
Yes.
something that only you could say, that only could come from your brain and your likes and dislikes and your experiences and the weird blend that makes you you. Because again, I have an identical twin sister, and even she would not come up with the things I do. She has very different art from me. So
Yeah.
it's just like if we can be as different as we are, then everybody else can too. So it's just like I just wish people would just lean in 1,000% into them, like what is them, because we would have so many interesting stories out there instead of everyone just kind of trying to make the same stuff that they think will be successful or they think will be popular or whatever. No, just make the thing for you, the thing that only you would make if no one else would read it or look at it. That's
Yeah.
at least that's what I like to focus my art on. And again, it's like everybody has their own thing they want to do with their work, but I'm
Yeah.
speaking from my personal preference.
No, I understand that. And actually with that in mind, it brings to me another point that I was thinking about for a while too. I think I was also just talking about this with a friend, that when you are making a story and you encounter a piece of media that resembles a lot of your story, by happenstance, because that happens a lot. That happens all the time.
Yeah.
All the time.
Oh yeah.
And it can be sometimes the most frustrating thing because it's like, oh, somebody already did this. Oh, I guess I'll just give up my story then because they already made it like better than me. But there's some cases where it's like it's too close where like okay I got to change something fundamental about it, but there's other cases if there's like one or two things that are seem similar but are just like they're still different. It was made at different times from a different person from a different inspiration. I think it's still okay to continue to work on that story and try to finish it because the way that you would tell that story is different from the way that another person might tell that story
Totally.
or use that a similar concept in some way. Because the story that I'm working on right now has some similar themes to an audiobook that I'm reading specifically for getting insight into how this person handled this magic system. And I'm like, oh man, this is so cool and so complex. But already in that magic system, I am picking out things that I just wouldn't do,
Mm-hmm.
that I wouldn't choose to, the direction that I would not choose to pursue if I was writing that story. And already that's really validating to see because I'm like, okay, even if I had that exact same concept that this person had, I would still execute it in a completely different way. And knowing that there's uniqueness within the way that you tell a story or like what point you're telling a story for, those things can still be different too. And I think that people get so tied up in trying to be original.
Mm-hmm.
Ain't nothing original under the sun.
No.
There's always some version of some story being told somewhere else. We're humans, we have similar experiences that we share because we are human. And so it makes sense that there will be similar themes that pop up in a story. But it's the way that you approach it, is your unique experience, your unique experiences that changes how that story is being told. Like how many versions of the hero's journey have we seen already? How many versions of coming of age have we seen? Um, how many versions of like, oh, like origin story or like the villain or all these themes and tropes are common,
Mm-hmm.
but the stories that resonate with us are because they're told in like new and different ways, or like these characters are going through different kinds of journeys that are saying different things, even while using the same narrative tropes and vehicles and things that we all know and love. So I think that if you feel like you are making a story that is a little bit similar to another concept, think about where the levels of intersection are and think about how you are treating those kinds of things differently or that magic system differently. If everything is overlapping, maybe consider
Mm-hmm.
maybe, change some things and pull some things back, but always keep it authentic. But in most cases, there's only going to be a few places of overlap and you're still going to be telling your story in a different way. It's the two cakes scenario where everybody wants a cake. And so it's like if you're telling a similar story, it's probably not the end of the world. It's okay.
Yeah. And
Persevere through it.
and it's honestly a lot of this stuff is like we've ingested a lot of stories in our lifetime, and
Yeah.
some of it is just it comes to your mind because you've seen it somewhere before. And like you said, it might be a mishmash of different tropes you've seen, and that's okay because it's like it's its own chimera that you made up, right? But it's if it is
Yeah.
plot point by plot point, it's another movie, then yeah, maybe or another story, then it's good to have people that can point that out to you because it might just be like this works because I've seen it before, right? So there are ways that might, it's good to keep both things in mind. But actually, while I was painting the last 2 years pretty solid, I was listening to a lot more audiobooks than I had the chance to, and hearing so many books. It was interesting hearing all the different turns of phrase that were used over and over again,
Yeah.
and so it's just like it's good to know that stuff where it's just like there's things where I would think like, oh, this is how I would write it, but then I was realizing no, I just heard that many times, so it's not how I would say it. So what's good about that too is like when you identify that, then you can say, what do I really mean, right? Or so for your
Yeah.
point, what is the idea that I really am trying to get, what the takeaway is here? Does it have to be this specific thing to still have the same meaning? So all that stuff is great because it helps you make your story stronger, just
Exactly.
analyzing that stuff further. I don't know if I'm making sense, but
No, it makes complete sense. It's like whatever your point of view, your experiences, while universal experiences, like in the way that you process them and the way that you experience them, what you have seen in the world, what you've absorbed, is that combination, that culmination is unique to you.
yeah,
So the way that you filter it is going to be unique to you too,
yeah,
as long as you stay, within the realm of like not just trying to plagiarize from somebody else,
yeah,
but understanding your influences and distilling them into something new. That's where every story comes from anyway. There's
mhm,
no way that we can not be influenced by the world that's around us and the stories that we've told and have been told in our lifetimes. Like we're always going to have some ghost of an influence in there. But how do you, yeah, like you were saying, how do you filter that through? What is your unique take? And I think it's a good practice actually to do is to look at like the books that you're reading and like see like what you would have done differently and like how you would have told that story differently. Because already within that, you can start to develop your identity of like, if you encounter something you don't like in a book and you're like, well, I wouldn't have done that. That feels weird to me. Examine why that feels weird to you. Examine what makes that thought diverge from the author's thought. And that's fuel that you can use for your own story to propel it forward because your own philosophy will shape your story and make your story into something that's different.
yeah, totally.
Yeah, that's always cool. I
Oh,
wanted to ask you, Mia, what made you ultimately diverge and finally embrace your own cringe in terms of like the true story that you wanted to tell for a fee and a lot of wonders?
I had a really honest friend that actually told me that it wasn't working, first of all. And the other part was I was so afraid that my emotions were my weakness in my storytelling. And that person told me that
Mm,
that was actually my strength. It needed editing. It definitely needed editing, but that was actually the thing that gave my work, my writing heart. And so I had to lean into that. And so instead of trying to hide that, I was actually stifling the heart in the story, on some level. So it actually um made me want to try that. But I have to say it was really hard because there's a scene in there where I had to pull through some pretty painful memories that I didn't want to be in that space. And I think my instinct was just to run away from that and just be like, no, I'm not going to create anything based on this. But I think that's a mistake. And I think for a long time since I was making my own work, I just kind of got to choose whatever I liked, whatever I enjoyed to paint, right? Whatever felt good to make. But there are
yeah,
some times, especially in a story, where it's like not every emotion is going to be positive, right? And it's like to really delve, like how you feel about a scene or how like trying to figure out how this character feels through a scene as well. You do have to draw on things that aren't fun,
yeah,
and it's like the instinct is to run away from that and be like, I'm just going to cut this out and just, design this so I don't have to experience those bits, right? And I think it was like leaning into not just the cringe, but just like the painful aspects of the process, whether it's through the actual writing, but or even just like the butt in the chair and doing this for hours and hours for months and months and months. Like that was not healthy, but it unfortunately had to happen, but I guess what I mean is like I had a different attitude towards creating before, where it was just about trying to avoid the things that force me to be vulnerable or force me to face my weaknesses or force me to face uncomfortable feelings, right? When I was creating. And
Yeah.
it definitely encouraged me to that it was worth that struggle, I guess is what I'm trying to say, to kind of delve to the deeper core of what I'm making, because you kind of can't delve deep into anything without encountering some kind of fear or discomfort. And if you're just running away from it, you're just never going to go deep enough, I don't know if I'm explaining that very well.
No, that's great. It's like because you do have to dig deep into the well of like what makes you you, and yeah, those memories are not always going to be pleasant. Like sometimes, like I mean, some of the best stories like have a measure of pain involved in them, like authentic, real pain. And it's not to say that you have to like feel hurt for every story that you're making, because some people are like making like little whimsical
Yeah.
fantasy adventures that are just as relevant as like the deep, heavy ones. But it is something that you felt that was important enough to communicate about something that you wanted to share about your experience and put into the character and reflect that through them. And by doing that, you create a connection with everybody else who's had a similar experience in their childhoods or in their lives, that they feel seen, they feel heard, they feel more validated by the fact that other people have gone through this, and an author thought it was important enough to convey in a storytelling medium. I think I might have talked about this a long time ago, or in at least another episode, that the fact that anything exists in art means that it was deemed important enough by the artist to convey, and
Mhm.
that gives it an inherent importance. And to see it in a story, in a thoughtfully, lovingly crafted project like that, is validating, because it's like they felt that this was important enough to share with the world.
Yeah.
And nothing makes somebody feel seen as much as something being portrayed in a medium like that.
Yeah.
Because like I cannot tell you how many times I've run into books where the character will have experiences where they are going through like forgetful memory, or like just like ADHD symptoms, or like being rejected for being too weird, or um making like failing and getting back up and like doing it again, and failing on like a catastrophic scale.
Yeah.
And it's made all of my failures and all of my weird idiosyncrasies feel so much more acceptable to me by comparison, because it's like, oh, this author must have experienced this too in some way. Maybe not so dramatic, but by dramatizing that action, by conveying it in such a way, I've felt more seen and less guilty about what I've gone through, or less like hard on myself about what I've gone through. I was like, well, this character is putting up with it. And, like
Yeah.
even though it's a fictional character, there's heart to be found in that.
Hmm.
And so, by conveying that pain, it's such a generous thing to do in your art, because again, we're making the best stories are the stories that are made for the author.
Yeah.
And by sharing that, it's like very, very indulgent. By sharing your indulgence, it's the act of like the greatest generosity, I think.
That's very well
That's a
said.
beautiful thing. What is the most self-indulgent thing that you think might be in your book?
Oh man. Uh,
I know that's a hard question, because it's like it should be like the whole thing, right? But like,
yeah.
is there like any scene or any like moment? I don't know if you can share it yet, but is there something that you have in the story that's like, surely I can't keep this in, and like it was allowed to be kept in? You're like, whoa.
I mean, I felt that way about especially the first drafts of it working, so to speak, in terms of the direction that it was going. The characters themselves, like I just felt like they were so in my head, like they were so alive in my head that I'm like, no one else is going to understand them the way I do. And they felt very self-indulgent to even have their dialogue or have their interactions. I don't know, it feels weird to say, but it was that thing you always say, where like, is this a thing, does it work, until
Yeah.
other people react. Like it felt very like I don't know, that feels really indulgent to give them a whole book. um
So
but I guess
cool.
just on an overall level, just the fact that I illustrated the whole dang thing, like I mean, it's just, who would let me do this was exactly the feeling about that, because again, publishers at the time were not eager to do a full color book, and I just needed
Mhm.
one, yes. But the fact that it's like again was always asking, are they sure they want me to do this? Because this is this is crazy. And am I sure I want to do it because it was just double the work? And anyway, very rambling
That's
answer to your
that's
question.
so cool. No, you're not. It's just so cool though. Just like who would want to like I can't like surely I can't get away with this.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
look at you, Mia. You did it. You got away with it.
Before they can pull
Before
the
they
plug,
know,
they can pull the plug
before
still.
they swoop down and get us, it's like, man, now you have to say to the camera, you got to say got him to the camera. Like now you have a book coming out and it's going to be in the hands of the public soon.
Oh
And
my
you tricked
God.
everybody into believing in you. Joke's on you. It wasn't a trick, it was real.
I wish I was a mastermind. I could claim credit or in any way that it was just, I don't know. I don't even want to say I'm stubborn because I was very much at every point was like, I had a clear vision of what I wanted, but I was like, please prove me wrong. I'm definitely not one of those people that's like, I have a vision and I am right and everyone else is wrong. I was just like, please tell me I'm wrong. This is crazy, right? Like,
I think you're like eager to be wrong, but like, I was like, everybody's like, no, this is good. Keep going. It's just like, you're like, what? I'm not
yeah.
wrong. And it's like, did it help to like know that like knowing that you're not wrong, like knowing that your vision had the validity to like be accepted by a major publisher, did it change anything for you, or do you still feel like surely that's still a fluke? Like, are you still there? Or are you like have you learned now? I'm so curious.
I am sorry to say that the imposter syndrome still exists because it's just like, I think just over time, just the closer I got to the finish line and stuff, and obviously now as it's getting closer to actually being a real thing, like I'm like, okay, all these people can't be lying to me, right? That would be too elaborate a hoax to pull on me, right? But I still don't take that as carte blanche. This worked for some reason for these people, but a lot of people could still hate it, you know. And it's just, but at the
Yeah.
end of the day, I think less. I used to really stress about the imposter syndrome thing and be like, if I'm proven to be an imposter, then it's over for me. And I guess in the thing that my mindset has changed about it is that as long as I enjoy making it and other people enjoy working on it or reading it, then it doesn't have to be everyone. It's okay, you know. If
That's
I
the
get to
whole
make
point.
things and make some people happy that read it and or like got to work on it, they're excited working on it, like that's awesome. That's the most I could ever hope for, you know.
Yeah.
Honestly, just getting to make the thing feels like the biggest pinch me moment and not in an imposter way, but just like I know how hard it is to get here. You know, it's like there's so many things that did go wrong on the way, and it still happened. You know,
Yeah.
and it's again, I don't credit just myself because I know I worked really hard, but I have a lot of amazing people in my life that, including you, that like took time out of your life to read, give me feedback, or to that worked on it. You know, in terms of the publishing team and everything, it does take a village to make a thing. It does,
It
and
really
that's
does.
when I was younger. I used to think, no, these authors I admire, they're just by themselves in some shack somewhere and they're just writing and they shit out a masterpiece or something. And that's just not how it works.
Yeah.
Well, that's how everyone else wants to think of artists. But the best kept secret is that we have communities of people that support us in every freaking way. And
That's
that's the only
exactly
thing
what
that
it
sees the
does.
light of day. And anyone who tells you the opposite is lying through their teeth. So
Oh, definitely. And I think it is definitely high time to dispel the myth that anything is created in a vacuum because it's not. It never is. It always needs someone to help reinforce a group of people to be like, hey, maybe try this instead, or hey, let's help you and support you, or hey, like let's like, any measure of support is a part of the process of making that project. Like no one's like you shouldn't be making a project completely alone without sharing it because it's like it's likely not going to be as good as it could be
yeah,
if you were making it with like your community helping you. And that help can look like so many different ways. It can be sessions spent with friends, like kind of like just talking things out and helping them having them help you problem solve through your story if you're tangled up in threads. It could be somebody just like a roommate bringing you coffee just to help you keep going. It
yeah,
could be, your parents like supporting you or allowing you like you to stay in their house while you're working on something or a partner doing the same. It could be just like somebody to come check on you and like make sure that you are working on the thing, keeping you accountable. We've done that for each other.
yeah.
It could look like so many different things. For me, it's body doubling with my friends and working on things asynchronous, like, with each other in the same room, working on different things and talking. And that helps my workflow like nothing else. And there's also now I created a venue for people to talk about our stories like in a local sense here in Atlanta. And so every 2 weeks we'll meet and talk about our stories and share what our progress is. And even seeing the encouragement and excitement for somebody to share their story, like a new story element with each other was like enough to keep a lot of us going where
Yeah.
we thought that like we're like, oh, surely we can't, like this is nothing. And then share it and you're like, people are like, I want more of this. When are you gonna share more of this? That's sometimes that's all it looks like. It
Yeah.
looks like so many different ways. And I think that people are so afraid of realizing that it is a group effort, not the fact that like all the hands are like involved directly with like making the story what it is. It could be, and that's fine too. That's all valid. But even if it's just the support and encouragement throughout the process, that community does matter. That community changes, it makes a lot of difference. It makes a world of difference to have that.
Yeah.
And I think for such a long time, I was working on my story in a vacuum, and now I'm not. And now there's a hope of actually something getting done.
Yeah.
And I'm kicking myself for not realizing that sooner, but I also can't fault my past self because the image that has been like given to so many of us is that vision of the author creating something in a shack, just
Yeah.
like vibing all day, be like, what to do? I've never talked to anybody. I can just do this every single day. It's not what it looks like.
Mhm.
It's not.
Yeah.
Yeah. We prepackaged and idolize stuff too much.
Yeah. I do want to say that for anybody that feels like, oh shoot, I need a whole group of people and I'm just by myself and I haven't met anybody yet. Like there is a part of it that is also done alone, right? Like I
For
think
sure.
for years I was actually incubating it by myself because I was too scared to show it to people. So that those incubation periods are really important too. And sometimes, again, an idea like is not. I don't know. I forget now as I'm starting other ideas, like how long it takes for the thing to start taking the shape that it feels like it's going
Yes.
to take. And there's so many false starts and so many horrible versions of it. I feel like there's also times where it's like too early to show people, like, and it actually might be
Oh, for sure.
counterproductive to show people too early. Like you have to incubate it yourself before it can, I don't know, this bad metaphor of like an egg hatching or something, but it's like it's not viable, right? It's not a viable birth yet, so just keep
Yeah, you have to
until.
like nurture it a little bit because like
Yeah.
you're correct about that. I think an egg is a perfect metaphor for this. What are you talking about? It's like I mean, if you hatch it prematurely, then like it's gonna come underformed, and it's also malleable in that very early state. So if you get too much influence early on, it can be hard to diverge from those influences that have come in to like try to shift it and change it. And then you feel like it's okay, like it has to be this thing. And I think keeping the original identity of what the point of the story was when you first had formed it is really important too. Like obviously it's going to change and shift over time, but
Yeah.
just remember why you were making it in the first place. I think that's the anchor
Yeah.
that can really help keep the story that you wanted to tell on the rails of like true to its original, like whatever like that original purpose was. And that's what I have to do often to my story. It's like, where did the story come from? Why did I even start
Yeah.
forming this idea in my head? And just kind of anchoring back to that. Even like listening to the playlist that I first had listened to when I came up with the original idea is like still really valuable to me and really generative to me because it reminds me of the old feelings that I had and like what gave this thing life in the first place. That's a very strong reminder. And I also shared that playlist with my other friends and they're like, "Oh my God, I can feel it. Like I see where you were coming from."
It's
And
nice.
that's really nice too. So yeah, don't lose sight too early. That's also not what you want to do at all.
Lorna, actually remember it was something I was going to ask you. Have you ever felt like when you were younger that if you got too much feedback, it suddenly wasn't your idea anymore? It was, and especially if the idea was good, that it's like, oh,
Yeah.
that's your idea. I can't use that, you know?
Oh, definitely when I was, yeah. Oh, yeah. I can't use that. Yes. Oh, definitely. I felt like that all the time when I was younger. And so I guess when I was younger too, I only really had one person to share it with because my best friend in childhood was like the one who would like, we would always share our stories with each other. And oftentimes it just became collaborations because it was just with each other and not with like a committee. And I think that was really healthy when I was younger, for sure. Now that I'm older, I think that the committee has to be a trusted group of people whose opinions I respect enough to know that like they have they have like what my original ideas and thoughts are like in mind, and they're not going to try to shift it too far away or like kind of insert so much of their own viewpoint and their own tendencies into the story um, to like kind of like sweep me away from what the original thing was supposed to be. But yeah, back then it was very much like just a kind of like very personal thing between each other. And I really like the way that that worked because like the moment that we're like, oh, well, it should be this, it should be that. I'm like, well, no, that doesn't feel right. I don't know if I want to do this anymore. That happened a lot too.
Yeah.
What about you? Did you feel that?
Oh yeah, I mean, even when I'd get paint overs, like I remember like sometimes I'd be like, oh wow, they just turned this painting way better than I could have done it, so I can't paint it like this because that's their idea.
No.
And I had some friends who had to tell me, including my partner, where he was basically saying, I would not have come up with this at all. This is your composition, your idea. I'm just helping you enhance it, like make what you're trying to say communicate better. And it's
Yes.
your idea. And it's just like it just kind of didn't feel earned because I didn't have the skills to see my painting in that way, right? But
Yeah.
and I think I could see why maybe some people are hesitant to get feedback because of things like that, right? Where it's like it has to come from me, otherwise it's not my work. Because that's how I used to think when I was younger. It has to be 100% my idea, otherwise it's not my work. And that's just not true. Again, it goes back to that lone person in a shack. Only your ideas make this thing. And to me, it's like you are a stronger artist the more things you ingest. Like we were saying earlier, the more stories you watch or read, the more movies you watch,
Yeah.
the more feedback you get from artists around you to make your work better, the more you talk to people, have conversations, exchange ideas, right? You evolve as a person the more of the world that you ingest. Otherwise, you're not going to communicate with very many people. Like if you're just I used to have a hermit side to me. I think I told you guys about it
Oh
when
yeah.
I didn't connect with people as easily as I do now when I do involve myself in the world more and I do exchange ideas with people and talk to people and I'm not scared of things changing my mind. I'm just like you ingest things, but then you process them and you curate them, and it's still your idea, you know?
Yeah, you said something important too, in that statement that you felt confident enough that you didn't feel like other people's feedback was going to change your mind. I think that that's a good indicator if your story is ready to share or not, because if you find yourself sharing it and you feel like you're changing your mind every single time you get a piece of feedback, that story is probably not actually ready to share yet, and you probably have to incubate it a little bit more. Because
Yeah.
that's also definitely happened where I'm like, oh, like maybe I should just do this. Maybe I should just do that. But again, remember, the way that you are telling your story is the way that only you would tell your story. You can
Yeah.
get feedback, but receiving feedback without feeling like it's completely compromising your vision or that you have to compromise your original vision. That's an important milestone to reach where you feel like the confidence in the story and like it's your story, but now you're tweaking it, making it tighter, making it better, but the core of it is not changing because of other people's whims. I think that that used to happen to me a lot
Mm-hmm.
with this story. I felt so uncertain, and that was also happening where like people would give me feedback and like I would feel like, oh, maybe it just has to be this now. And I'm like, oh, I don't think it's ready yet, actually, to share. Like maybe I need to workshop this and like then remember what it meant to me originally so that I don't fall away from that.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just wanted to like make that point because I've experienced that and I was like, oh, okay, like yeah, the incubation period is also, yeah, extremely important for that reason.
Yeah. No, I'm
Not losing sight of that.
I totally agree with everything you said. And sometimes it is good to have people that push against you, like, right, they push you and maybe make you defend your decisions, right? Because it's like, I used to think of it as like, and obviously people you can trust. I 1000% agree with that, that you need to share your stuff with people you trust who you know, even when you make mistakes, because you will, they're not going
Yeah.
to judge you for that, or you're not going to feel more self-conscious. Because I was definitely, when I kind of went back to writing, it had been a long time. It was very easy for me to just be like, nope, I'm not going to do this. It's too risky. I'm not going to do this ever again. And if you are in that vulnerable state, like I was, it is very, like, I just suggest what you said, Lauren, to surround yourself with people that, you can trust. Um, but that also, like, hopefully this is harder to find people who you can trust that can also be brutally honest and
Yes.
something's really not working and force you to defend your ideas. It's not that they might say this doesn't work and you're like, well, I really want to do it, but forcing you to defend why you put that there actually helps you figure out a better way to anchor it in the story or to justify its existence, right? So I know I'm talking kind of abstractly, it's kind of hard without examples, but that was another thing that when I was younger I used to feel like if I had to defend an idea it just wasn't good at all, and it's like, no, actually the process is kind of a back and forth, you know kind of like when you're rendering, you're noodling, you're pushing and pulling, right? You're adding contrast and lowering this or whatever. It's like there's a lot of pushing and pulling with storytelling. And
Yeah.
people just think I used to think I'm just gonna write a draft and it's done. And you're just gonna do one editing pass and it's done. And it's like, no,
Nope.
no way.
Don't do that. Never publish the first draft.
Oh my God, please don't.
You're crazy. Don't do that. No, I think, yeah, to that point as well. Oh, it's so funny. Like, don't publish the first draft. Like, what are you doing? I think for people who also are supporting their storyteller friends, giving feedback, I think is also an important thing to touch on
Yeah.
because oftentimes we get feedback that is very much from our own perspective, and we can't help but to do that. But I think the more helpful kind of feedback to give is something that is a little bit more guiding them along the right path. It's like asking questions rather than like saying like, what if this character did this instead? And saying, is this character action the most meaningful action that they can take, or is there something else that they could do that better anchors the story in place, or like better communicates who they are as a person? Things that are more, and it's hard to develop the skill, but things that are just like more general rather than so specific, like how you would do it, because you also run the risk of kind of like inserting too much of yourself into that feedback and it might not actually be helpful when what you're trying to say is how can we guide this action to make it stronger, make it better? Just like your friend who said like you're just retelling the story. Tell your own story.
Yeah.
Like that's a fantastic piece of feedback. I want a friend like that to be like, guide me on the right path, but don't tell me how to do it. Just tell me that I need to go back on the right path. Like that's what a good piece of feedback is like this is not working. What can you do that makes this story better, that works with the purpose, the core purpose of your story? I think that is super valuable. That's the kind of feedback that I'm always looking for is, hey, like you're writing this thing, it's off the path of like what you've established. Like, how do you get back on that path? I'm like, ooh, you're right. You're recognizing that. And you often realize as a writer or as the artist, like if you're getting art feedback, that you've also not felt confident in that zone either, and that it was bothering you, but you didn't know why. To have somebody verbalize that is so valuable because you're like, I didn't like that anyway. Thank you. I'm so glad you recognized that because it's like you're almost like released from it in a way. It's like really go release from this and create something better to like fill this gap in the story.
Or like
Um,
killing your darlings, right? It might be something you love and it needs to die because it doesn't belong in the story. Like that happens too.
Sometimes you got to kill your darlings, and it's sometimes it's so painful. There
Mhm.
might be another place that that darling can go. There
Yeah.
might be a whole separate story that you can make for that darling, but sometimes it's just saying here. How many darlings did you have to kill when you made your book?
Oh yeah. Like I mean, I didn't count them, but I had a whole like a group of characters that were in an original draft, and it was actually it was one of the better scenes in that draft because there was a lot going wrong with that draft. And I got rid of them completely because they just didn't. There was another character that basically encapsulated them completely, and I couldn't have both. So that happens a
Mm,
lot too with early writers too, where it's like you have two characters that kind of accomplish the same purpose, yet
yes.
and it's stronger, right? So that's what I ended up doing, and it's like it works so much better without them. But yeah, I have some art of those characters. I think in some of my sketchbooks, I'm like, oh yeah, they're not there anymore, you know. And same
Is
with
it
my
on your Patreon? I can look and see.
probably in the old archive posts. Yeah, it's probably in there.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of things on your Patreon that are really beautiful, like beautiful sketches and like beautiful behind the scenes process stuff. And it's like it's been so cool to see all of like the developmental stuff, like, and how you kind of like arrived at some of these final designs or how you like just how you think in the first place is really cool to see too.
Mhm.
Um, and
It's
how you like build the overall vision. It's like it's awesome to see that behind the scenes stuff. So yeah. But I also, and it's funny because I've been talking about the story for so long, and I'm like, I really want to make it happen so that I can actually put like voice and description to the stuff that I'm talking about when I refer to my own story. So it's like more talking about it here is more incentive for me to finish it.
yeah.
But I also had realized that recently that I had two characters that were like accomplishing the same goal in the story, and I realized that I was like, wait, this person could play out the scene, but this person could also play out that same scene. That is a problem. I
Hmm.
was like, you never want a character that can accomplish the exact same goal. And I was like, oh, that's my sign. I
Hmm.
guess I either got to get rid of her or I gotta find a different role for her to play because it can't be the exact same one that the main character's playing. Like this is not working.
Yeah.
And that was really hard to come to the
I
realization.
know, I know.
I love that character so much, and I was like, fundamentally change her or get rid of her, but she can't be here if she's doing the same. We can't be parallel. We
Yeah.
can't. No, it doesn't work.
I like also what you were saying about the kind of feedback to I just want to add one more thing to that
Yeah.
actually one thing that really like because I was really bad at that in terms of giving feedback too where I would try to solve the problem for the and I felt
Mhm.
like it was my job like I can't just point something out and say I don't like this I have to come up with a solution but that actually is not what you should do like you said saying this doesn't work and trusting that the writer is going to figure out how to do it is more helpful right because you're kind of giving them agency to figure it out themselves but actually, what
Yeah.
I find is kind of one of the simplest ways to tell them the things that you really liked, kind of like
Yep.
this line or this moment. These are all the things that worked for me, and then these are the things that didn't work for me. And you can either say why or not. Like they might ask you, why didn't you like this part? And you can be honest about that. Or if they don't want to hear that, at least hearing that it didn't work will at least keep the gears in their head turning. And if more than one person says that part doesn't work, then they will get the hint that they should work on that. So
Yeah.
if you're kind of afraid of giving people feedback that you have to know about storytelling, anyone who's a reader or who ingests stories knows enough about story to tell whether something works or it doesn't. And even if
Yep.
it's your own point of view, it's helpful because it might not line up with my point of view, but I still want to communicate to you. So all the things that don't work for you as the reader are bumps in me communicating my story to you. So it's valuable to hear that. So, but
Absolutely.
yeah,
That's so valuable. That's so valuable
yeah,
to be able to have that. Like that overall insight of like, what did you like? What didn't you like? How can, okay. Like then the author can come back and be like, okay, how can I fix this? How can I mend this? And like, it's not to say like when you're giving feedback, sometimes you can be a little more specific if all the DNA
yeah,
is already there. It's like, hey, if you just like switch out the order of events, you probably are okay. Like you can, if the solution is right there in front of them, then like maybe it's okay to like give them a hint to get there.
yeah,
But for like if the story is like really early and uncertain, then like it might be too early to give that kind of specific feedback. I think that's more for later down the line. That's going to happen in editing regardless. But
Mhm.
I feel like yeah, it's just like a line to be careful of. If you care about an author or an artist, like don't solve all the problems for them,
Yeah,
please.
yeah, yeah,
Just give them what's working and what's not working for you and like let them come to their own conclusions. That's always the most helpful thing.
totally.
Oh, it's my favorite. Yeah. So Mia, where can people find your book?
Oh, well, it is available for pre-order now, wherever books are sold, and it's going to be out on April 15th. And
April. It's coming out so soon.
I know it's just like a month away.
Oh
I
my
mean, I don't know when
God.
we're airing this, but yeah.
Oh, I
It's pretty
love
crazy.
that. Mia, I'm super excited. I'm so stoked for you.
Thank you. I think it's hilarious that we thought it would be out fall of last year because that was impossible.
No, when you were saying that last year, I was like, oh, I don't know. I don't know. You said you were finished. How many? Oh no.
Yeah, I turned in the last art in August, so yeah, there's no way.
I'm really glad that you got the extra time.
Yeah, me too.
It's the best book that it can be because you had that extra time. I'm so excited to have it on my bookshelf and have it in hand and read it. And I've already read it, but like read it in its full form, in its final form.
Yeah, with all the finished art.
Because I've seen like a lot of the process stuff and some of the finished pieces, but it's a completely different experience when you have it in hand in full color, the way it's meant to be presented. Because it's like that's your full vision come to life. Like that's what I really want to see. And the thing that I'm most excited about is to see how everybody reacts to it because I know that they're going to be moved by it. I know they're going to love it. And the art is stunning. Of course it's stunning, but I think the story is also stunning. It's just such a beautiful adventure. And it covers themes that I don't often get to see in a lot of stories as well. So I don't know, I'm super stoked for you. I'm really excited about this being
Thanks.
shared with the world. And like, I'm just so proud of you. You did it, Mia, despite being afraid and despite doubting yourself like the whole way. I wanted to throw you into the sun
I
so
know,
many
I know
times.
you did.
I was
I
like,
feel like
Mia, come on
I feel
now.
bad. I feel like I transmitted a lot of anxiety to everyone in my life at that time,
No,
and you were caught in the crossfire too.
I have a shield against it because I have so much of my own. I can't take it on, but I can also be like, Mia, Just see yourself how I see you. I believe in you so much. But I think the whole time too, I wasn't anxious because I knew that you were going to do it regardless, like no matter what, because like you've never given up on anything before that you like really believed in. So I knew you were going to finish this one. I knew you were. I wasn't worried about you, but I just wanted you to have a better outlook for yourself, for your own benefit, really. I was like, just you can do it. You're doing it. And you did it.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Congratulations on finishing it. But yeah, thank you all so much for listening to this episode. We're super excited for Mia to have her book out into the world. So we're going to share links below. Pre-order it here. And the other one that I probably put down there too, I don't know. It's down there. Look at it. It is, yeah, it is worth it. It's going to be absolutely stunning. Tell us more about, I don't know, whatever you want to share with us, Mia.
Oh,
Promote
I I
it.
mean,
I'm giving it to you.
I've talked about it a lot on the show, but it's a reimagining of Alice's Adventures in Wonderland that I've been working on for over 10 years. Oh, man.
Sounds great.
2012, I think, was the first year I officially started working on this version, but I've been thinking of reimagining this since 2007, but hey, it's been a long time. You've probably heard, if you listen to our show, you've heard me talk about waiting tables, doing all the things to make it happen. Then finally the pandemic kicked my butt to to finally finish it, and yeah, it's a sister story. It's about an identical twin that has to choose between staying with her sister in a world she doesn't really fit in, or going by herself into a magical wonderland to discover who she is. So that's kind of what it's about. It's fully illustrated, 30 acrylic paintings, about 20 pencil drawings. Poured a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into it. Yeah, Scholastic's publishing it April 15th. I said the date already, and it says ages 9 to 12, but it's really 9 and up. Like, I didn't write it for a specific age, but it is what it is. So
Yeah, no, I love it. And I love that also, the overarching themes of the story are basically exactly what we were talking about
yeah, yeah.
as well. Where it's like, do you want to go where you don't quite fit in, or do you want to go on an adventure and discover who you truly are?
Mm-hmm.
It's up to
And
you.
face all your fears doing it. Yep.
Face all your fears, every single one of them, because they will all come out.
Yeah,
All
yeah.
the fear, anxiety, and doubt, and you become changed when you come out the other side. That's exactly what happened to you. That's exactly what happened to Afia.
Yeah.
I can't wait for people to read it.
Oh,
Oh, thank you so much for joining us, everybody. I hope that you go forward embracing your cringe, have confidence in yourself, or enough confidence at least to get through your stories and finish your ideas. Share them with the world. We'll talk to you later. Bye.